Hello guys, and welcome again to the channel. So you're thinking of buying your first investment property? Great! But let me tell you, the shift from being a home buyer where you're led by your heart to being a real estate investor where you're led by the numbers is like such a massive shift. And in all seriousness, that's where most newcomers, yours truly included, spend their most expensive errors. Today, I'm going to walk you through precisely what I wish someone had advised me on, so that you can skip the remorse and begin a lucrative, stable portfolio from day one. Let's proceed. So what's the single largest regret I hear from first-time homeowners? It's this profound, gut-wrenching misapprehension of the true cost of homeownership. As a homeowner, a surprise expense is a nuisance. As an investor, the same surprise expense is what siphons your cash flow month after month and can ultimately bring about financial destruction. It's not just about the mortgage. It's about all the things the mortgage doesn't say. Let's put some real numbers on this, because this is where the rubber meets the road. On average, the buried costs of owning a single-family home in America, the stuff beyond your mortgage payment, add up to over $18,000 a year. That's not a misprint, and it's growing. In just the past 4 years, these carrying costs have grown by an eye-popping 26%. That's due to inflation of materials and labor, and exorbitant insurance costs. So whereas most investors anticipate costs going up by a modest 2 or 3% per annum, the real number is more the 6% per annum. If you're not factoring that in, your profitable property can turn into a money pit without you even noticing it occurred. So let's boil down the most typical mistakes against the reality you must budget for. The mistake is only budgeting for your mortgage payment, the so-called PITI. The reality is you must budget for everything else, and that's a nice $18,000 a year on average. The mistake is anticipating expenses to only grow steadily. The reality is they're ballooning, and you need a stress-tested model. A huge one is ignoring CapEx reserves. That's money for high-ticket replacements like roofs and HVAC. And finally, the biggest attitude shift. You have to come out of homeowner mentality, where your own personal money can cover a shortfall, and into CEO mentality. This house is a business, and it has to pay for itself. This brings us to the absolute bottom line of successful investing: financial mastery. Here you learn to become ruthless with your numbers. We're going to talk about how to compute your true profit, how to properly fund your reserves so that you'll never have a surprise party, and then use advanced metrics to actually compare deals like a pro. The gold standard metric is called net operating income, or NOI. That's your profitability on the property prior to even thinking about your mortgage. It's the pure health of the property. This is how you calculate it. Step 1, gross income. That is your rental income plus any extra fees like pet rent or application fees. Important thing here, never ever include security deposits in there. That is not your cash. Step 2, subtract vacancy. Be realistic. If you are bringing in $40,000 in revenue, maybe you deduct $6,000 for a 15% vacancy adjustment. Things happen. Step 3, subtract all your operating expenses, your OPEX. This includes insurance, property taxes, management fees, utilities, admin expenses. What's left is your NOI. This number says it all. Now, this is probably the most important slide for a new investor. You must understand the very significant distinction between two types of reserves. First, operating reserves, or OPEX. That's for the day-to-day items, minor fixes, turnover cleanings, and filling those time gaps between vacancies. As a rule, put aside 15 to 30% of your gross monthly rent for this. That's included in your monthly costs. And then you have your CapEx, or capital reserves. That's your oh crap kitty for the big ticket items. The roof, the AC and heating system, the water heater, appliances. There's a known lifespan and a known gigantic cost associated with these things. You want to be saving on the order of $2,000 a year per property for this. Here's the dire warning. When you fail to accrue a CapEx reserve and a mission-critical system fails, you're forced to draw down your own funds or borrow. This is when an illusory investment is transformed into a nightmare. Fund your CapEx. It turns chaotic catastrophes into routine expense items. I had a friend who was an investor who said to me, I needed to buy 2 HVAC systems in 2 years. Without reserves, it destroyed my cash flow, and I borrowed against my house. That's a live, avoidable regret. By funding your CapEx in the right way, you are ensuring that there are no significant effects on your cash flow. You sleep better at night. Once you have a solid NOI that includes your reserves, then you can start using pro-level strategies. The first one is the capitalization rate, or the cap rate. It is your annual NOI divided by your cost. It is your return on the property without borrowing, and a good range is usually in the 5 to 10% zone. Generally, the higher the cap rate, the higher the potential for profitability. The second one is cash-on-cash return. This is what you actually care about. It's your year-round cash flow divided by the total cash you actually invested, your down payment and closing costs. This tells you how well your money is working for you. Now I want to talk about a mythical rule of thumb that has to retire, the 1% rule. This is the idea that your monthly rent should be at least 1% of the purchase price. It's an okay initial filter, but it is a terrible way to analyze a deal. Why? Because it's a massive oversimplification. It completely ignores your operating expenses. It doesn't account for CapEx reserves. It misses market nuances. And in the majority of markets today, appreciation is outpacing rent growth. So you might lose a great long-term investment simply because the rent doesn't pass an arbitrary hurdle. Savvy investors use precise modeling based on NOI, cap rate, and cash on cash. Don't rely on a simplistic rule. All right, let's say your numbers are great. Now is the part that de-risks your entire investment, due diligence. Here is where you verify the physical condition, the legal foundation, the zoning, and your insurance. Rushing here is how good deals become bad deals. You can't simply have a typical home inspection as an investor. You need a specialized CapEx-focused examination. You have to do 2 things. 1, estimate the remaining useful life of all the large systems, the roof, the HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical. And 2, take that information and actually budget for their replacement in your CapEx model. Knowing that the HVAC has 2 years remaining is powerful stuff. And an extra piece of advice, don't accept contractor suggestions on face value. They will order full replacements when a repair will do. Always get a second or third opinion. A silent deal killer. Zoning regulations decide what you can and cannot legally do with your property. Ignoring it can sabotage your whole plan, although your financial model is perfect. You need to verify the use category. Is it purely residential? Verify the floor area ratio and density, which will dictate how much square footage or units you can have. Verify height and setback restrictions if you ever want to construct. And, more importantly, if temporary rentals like Airbnb are what you plan, you must verify local ordinances and HOA ordinances to make sure that it's actually allowed. Let me show you. You find this perfect property. You replicate excellent cash flow off the back of a high-revenue short-term rental model. The numbers are great. But you leave out the zoning test. You buy it. Then you learn. Short-term rentals are prohibited under the local bylaws, or the HOA has a strict ban. You are then forced to lease it long-term for half the income. Your entire financial model is useless from that point on. This is why careful regulatory scrutiny isn't something you can choose to skip. It's essential. You've done your numbers, your due diligence. Now you've got to go out and purchase the stuff. This is strategic acquisition. You must understand financing constraints, scope out loan options, analyze the rental market properly, and most importantly, exercise emotional control. Financing an investment doesn't work the same as financing a home. To start, You can't apply an FHA loan to a straight investment property. It's owner-occupier only. A conventional loan will work, but you'll typically have to make a down payment of 15 to 25%. A real strategic option is a DSCR loan, debt service coverage ratio. Your qualification is based on the property's income, your NOI, not your income. This is ginormous on a scaling basis. And then there are hard money loans. Great for short flips, but with their 10% plus interest and huge fees, they're a terrible option for long-term rentals. Notice how DSCR loans are tied directly back to your financial model? If your NOI calculation is wrong, you won't even qualify. This is likely the hardest part. You need to treat this as an income-generating asset, not your sweet little home. You will pay too much out of fear of missing out, or FOMO. To keep your sanity, you need a strategy. 1. Create a strict budget for your top purchase price and stick to it. 2. Use a rational checklist of realistic considerations to offset any emotional draw. 3. Seek objective counsel from a trusted advisor who is not emotionally involved. And 4. Practice patience. Rushing leads to skipping inspections and due diligence, which creates very expensive, very preventable mistakes. You've bought the property. Yay! Now you're a landlord. This is not a passive investment. You are now an operating business owner with tenants, repairs, and an onslaught of regulatory compliance to worry about. This operational reality is a huge cause of regret for beginners. You can't and shouldn't attempt to do this alone. Success is predicated on building your A-team. You need a real estate agent who comprehends investment property, not someone looking for a home for the family. You need a real estate attorney for the intricate legal tasks. You need reliable contractors to complete the repairs. Above all, you need a CPA who handles real estate. They can do miracles with tax planning like cost segregation. If you're not managing the property yourself, you need a solid property manager. And a bookkeeper to oversee day-to-day finances is a head-turner. They are not an expense. They're an investment in your peace of mind and your prosperity. So there's your action plan map. First, re-engineer your financial modeling. Say goodbye to the simplistic PITI payment and the 1% rule. Aggressively account for OPEX and make CapEx reserves non-negotiable. Second, make due diligence a priority. Secure those CapEx-focused inspections and title and zoning check as if your wallet were on the line, because it is. Third, choose management wisely. For most newbies, that 8 to 12% property management fee is actually compliance insurance against an expensive fair housing lawsuit. And fourth, assemble your crew. Hire that specialist CPA and attorney. Do that and you will transform the emotional search for property into a rational, systematic, and lucrative business enterprise. Your first investment sets the standard for all the rest. Make it an intelligent one. If you like this video and wish to proceed with your real estate learning, then subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you can know what's in store next. To keep your momentum rolling, I've chosen another video for you that will help you in your investing journey. You'll see it right here on the screen. Just click it and go ahead and learn some more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.